Hey, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Kolpack and Izzo podcast. Welcome to December. It should be playoff football weekend around here, but we'll be okay.
Remember November?
Hey,
we really don't remember November.
Do you see what I posted this morning about this date, the date we're taping in Bison football lore? It's a big one. December 4th,
Montana
2010.
State. Montana State.
I'm looking at the infamous photo that Dave Sampson, the great Dave Sampson of the Forum, took of us on the snow pile in Bozeman that day. And I mentioned this on my show this morning. Stupid me that didn't wear a hat. You remember how sick I got the following week?
I remember that.
I was sure I was going to make it to Spokane the following week when we went to Eastern Washington.
Oh, that's right. We were in the Denver airport, and I thought I'd take you to the hospital.
What is, from this game, and you've wrote about this extensively, and I have as well, what do you remember the most, I guess, out of this game?
The physicality of it. I remember the physical nature of NDSU in the second half and just steamrolling this team. And I remember after the game, the Montana State head coach, was it Ash?
Rob Ash.
Was talking about, we need to get to that physical level if we're ever going to make that kind of a dent in the playoffs. They never did.
No.
Then Rob Ash got fired. He could never recruit the kind of linemen that NDSU has recruited over the years. As hard as he tried, and that became a focus of his.
No doubt.
Because that was the difference.
And I was stunned he said that. The Bison were in their first ever time in the playoffs, and Montana State, they have to recruit like them. I mean, I was just like, what? And I think to a lot of people, it opened up their eyes that maybe NDSU is a lot closer than they ever thought, Jeff.
Yes, and it started in 2003 at Montana when they were closer to that level than we ever thought they would. And then they go to Montana State in 2010, 7 years later, and they're closer to the playoff level than we ever thought. Now, you look at that game, DJ McNorton could have played flag football and scored in the second half.
Nobody was touching him that day. 207 yards, 4 touchdowns. And I asked Cole Jerick if he remembered how many passes they completed. He said 6. The answer was 5.
5. I said 3 last week.
5 of 19 for 56 yards, and they won by 4 touchdowns.
And it was just a boat race.
It was, and it all starts that Monday of that week where they were practicing outside at Dakota Field in a literal blizzard.
I still have that photo.
Yeah.
I've used it over the years when, say there was a question, does NDSU need an indoor football facility? I don't even have to say anything. Here's the photo.
Yeah, all right. That was just that whole team, and I know we talked about this briefly, and I want to move on, but that whole 2010 squad, that was a fun ride. It was a fun ride to be a part of. I remember we going out there like, well, we're not sure. They beat a Robert Morris team. They were just okay. We're not sure.
They had 4 losses going into that game.
Jensen got concussed early on, and you're like, all right, well, it was a good run, and they destroyed this team in the second half. It was remarkable to see, and obviously we know what happened the following week. So fun to look back at that. We have some football news right off the hop as we're taping this morning on this Friday. North Dakota State has added to its football verbal commitments this week. This haul up to 3 for the week. They got 2 earlier in the week from Farmington, Minnesota, and Bismarck, North Dakota, and Eli Green and Jack Steckler. And then this is a biggie today. Bryce Lance out of Marshall, Minnesota, becomes, I believe, now the 20th or 21st commit for the class of 2021. The younger brother of Trey Lance, tall, lanky wide receiver.
6'2".
He's had a record-setting career at Marshall at the wide receiver spot. Finished this year with 30 receptions, 631 yards, 8 touchdowns for a Tiger team that, again, was really, really good in 2020. So what do you make of this?
Well, I'm looking at his highlights on the huddle page as we speak here, and yeah, he's 6'2". He could catch the ball in traffic. There's several throws in here where Marshall just whips it up there, and say, Bryce, go get it.
Yep.
He had 30 catches for 631 yards and 8 touchdowns in 7 games this year. Very good basketball player, great athlete. Had offers from South Dakota State and some Ivy League offers.
Not just some. Princeton, Dartmouth, and Columbia. I mean, he's a rocket scientist. I knew this. I've had a chance to visit with him a couple of times, much like his entire family. That's a really strong family there, smart family. And I was just literally talking about this before he announced it. Would he decide to go somewhere else, or was this always in the bag? And hopefully we're getting a chance to visit with him today,
right?
About that.
And he'll get the proverbial question, following in your brother's footsteps. He'll be getting that for the next year or so, I'm sure, and certainly today. But let's make it. What do you make of that, following in your brother's footsteps?
I thought the tweet that he put out, he goes, "I'm forging my own road," I think is how he put the text next to it, which I think you have to take him for that as well. It's obviously going to be very difficult to shed that shadow for a bit until he plays maybe a lot. But that's always going to be there, though. His brother left early to go into the NFL draft. His brother had the best year maybe in the history of the FCS, that one calendar year. That's always going to be there, but I think he's dealt with that his entire life, starting with in high school especially.
Do you know who the happiest person in Fargo-Moorhead is right now?
Who do you think?
Louis Gruenberg.
Yes.
His great-grandfather, his grandfather, who is 100 years old or almost close to 100, lives in a retirement home in Moorhead, is, what a great thing for Louis. What a great guy he is, too, just found. But, I did a story on him and the family. It's Angie, Trey, or Bryce, the boys' mother's dad, yep. And what a cool thing.
Yeah,
I got a handwritten letter from Louis.
Is that right?
Yes, last week.
That's
thanking
awesome.
me for that article.
That's
and I did
so
that
cool.
story in October.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And here's a cool thing. It was addressed to Jeff Kolpack, WDAY, Fargo. That's it. And it made it to my desk at the Forum.
That's fantastic.
So kudos to whoever at the post office saw that.
Yeah.
And recognize that this was a media thing.
That's really cool. And you're right. He'll be the happiest guy. Matt Entz is probably going to be on that list.
He's one
as well.
Yep.
And this adds to, as we look down the road at that spot where the Bison obviously have recruited some talented guys at that position where he fits in down the road. But this is the height, the ability to catch the ball in traffic. That's what they've been recruiting at this spot over the last couple of years.
Now, is he a guy who could play right away? Will he be a right away guy next fall? Maybe one of those 4-game guys. We'll see.
I definitely think that.
Right.
I don't think you need him considering what you have coming back at that spot where you have your top 2 receivers back, and Watson and Sproles are both back in 2021. In the fall of 2021, I'm talking right now. He could play the 4 games much like Trey did in his freshman year when he got here on campus. I think that could be the same route for Bryce.
Anthony Fauci came out this week and said he foresees full football stadiums this coming fall.
That's a good sign. I heard that too, and I'm like, all right, well then let's go. I think you know my position on where the things are at for the spring, and I would be pleasantly surprised if they play. I would be on that front. We'll go on to the assumption they're playing until they're not. But I would still be surprised at this moment if they play.
The women are letting in 1,000 fans for the UND game on December 16th.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second on that. I don't know, Cole. You know this better than I about the monetary situation that surrounds the athletic program. And if they can't get half the dome, and that seems like a stretch to get 9,000 to 10,000 people there now, I still think that's asking a lot. We're still 3 months away from playing games, but that still seems like a Herculean task on that front. The NEC, the Northeast Conference, and this is one I talked about with you a couple weeks ago, they were one of the leagues that hadn't put out a schedule. They're playing, I think, 5 games with a couple non-conference. They're playing on Sundays as well during the spring and
why is that?
The middle of the week. I don't know why that's the case. The Ohio Valley is doing that too, that they're playing on Sundays as well. I don't know if they want to avoid conflicting with their basketball team playing, because obviously that's going to be the case if there is games in the spring. But they're now the next one. So I think the Patriot is the only one that is intended to play that hasn't put out at least a schedule yet for what they want to do.
Are you surprised by that? And I get this because for FCS programs to play, and if you can't have a lot of fans, how do you afford it?
That's my whole thing. If you can't have people there,
you don't have the TV contracts that the Big Ten and all the big Power Fives do.
Then what are you doing? And that's surprising.
But how's the
to
MAC
me.
making it? Of course, the
MAC still got something from ESPN though. They're still. I mean, it's not like
MACtion isn't that.
No, but they still get a pretty good stipend from ESPN. It's not anything of what the Big Ten or the Pac-12 get or the SEC, but it's still something.
Speaking of FBS, my friend.
Yeah.
You changed your tune earlier this week. You do an opinion piece on the air that says essentially that NDSU should go FBS.
They should consider it. Consider it is what I said. Yep.
Well, that means yes. What do you mean? You can't get a little bit pregnant on this issue, Don.
Well, what did you think of what I said? First off,
I think it's true. I think they should consider it.
Where I'll list out a couple things, and then I want you to pick up from there.
Okay.
Here's, for those that missed it, this is what I said. In terms of the lack of commitment that I have seen from FCS teams should be glaring for NDSU to say, let's look in the mirror and say, is this the best possible destination for us? Much like it happened in the Division II days. You can speak more to that than I can. I understand the NCAA reduced scholarships at the Division II level, and that also forced their hand. We have not heard that on the FCS level. I would say if they want to look like a FBS program, the indoor practice facility, which they're raising money for and maybe in the home stretch of, that certainly goes to that as well. And if the fans, and we have seen this, where playoff attendance has bottomed out over the last couple of years, where we've had empty Fargo Domes each of the last three playoff runs, 17, 18, and 19, prior to the semifinal game, the fans are bored, then this would certainly energize them. You can go off on whatever point you'd like to from there.
Agree, all of the above. I mean, how can you not disagree with those points? Here's the issue, though.
Money.
Well, money, and where do you play it? The Mountain West isn't coming calling.
You believe that?
They're not gonna want to travel to Fargo, North Dakota.
You're right. They probably wouldn't. But is there not to add a quality football program for the presidents to say, you know what, this could help us? Would that am I too pie in the sky thinking on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
free enough.
Look at UND in the Big Sky.
Yep.
They admitted UND, and they couldn't wait to get rid of them.
They couldn't wait to get rid of them. Is absolutely right.
Now those are FCS budgets or mid-major, but there's a lot of mid-major in the Mountain West too.
And there's a lot of politics that would go on in this as well.
So here's what has to happen: the reform with the Power Five and breaking away. Then you have something. Which,
by the way, came out yesterday. A group that
I know
advocated for that. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I saw that. That's why I brought it up. So here's what's going to have to happen. NDSU will have to be in that next group of five. Okay?
Yep.
And maybe you form your own league.
Okay. With who?
Not everybody in Missouri Valley is going to go group of five.
Nope.
NDSU, South Dakota State, Montana State, UND, USD. I think Northern Iowa, although financially not that great, is going to do everything it can. Northern Illinois, Wyoming, Colorado State, and Air Force.
That's a heck of a league. It's a huge league. I don't think UND and USD are going anywhere. I crossed them off.
Cross them off?
I don't even know about South Dakota State, honestly. They'll
go. If NDSU goes, they have to go.
You think probably.
There's money in Brookings. Look at the money they raise for their indoor.
I know. Northern Illinois, you have in there.
Yep. They'll break away from the MAC.
Wyoming, you have in there.
They'll break away from the Mountain West.
Interesting.
And you keep the Colorado State, Wyoming, Air Force rivalries intact.
Bold.
A Midwest, West flavor. They're up the corridors. Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, North Dakota, South Dakota, and you venture into Illinois a little bit.
I like it.
And Iowa.
I like that. Yeah, it's not bad. Northern Illinois has been the class of the MAC.
Can I call Craig? Let's call Craig and get him on. See what he thinks of this idea.
And that goes to the politics part of this, where I'm sure Wyoming wants no part of, like you mentioned,
do they want to keep
North Dakota
flying
State.
And doing the California thing? And Boise is great for that league, but is that
Boise? You put Boise in there?
No.
Boise's on its. They're not a Power Five. Boise's a Group of Five school.
No, but they'll stick with the California schools.
They're going their own way.
Well, they'll go with that Mountain West. They'll stay with their own
with
thing.
Fresno.
Yep.
There's no UNLV in there. UNLV, they're not going to get in this league.
No.
No trips to Vegas.
Are you that big of a gambler where you need a UNLV?
My dad is. I know that. I would go with him if I needed to. It's interesting to think about. Now, okay, so there you got league. I think the bigger hurdle
This has to be a football-only league.
Yes, I think the bigger hurdle is money. And now I'll ask you this, because you covered this, obviously, extensively. The big donors that came out of the woodwork when NDSU wanted to go Division I, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would they go back to him now, Kolpack, and say, okay, now we're going to make the big boy step and say we need a major ask here? Do you think the pocketbooks would open then?
I don't know. Let's get Irv Iniger and bring him bring him back into the fundraising mode. Well, you have to if you're going to make FBS. But isn't there going to be more TV money in theory?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other caveat of this, too, and this is something you and I have argued about in the past, if you're FBS, there are games that now open up to you that you can't get at the FCS level. You know who's calling you back? Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska. They will play you as an FBS school, and they'll pay you. They'll pay you at least maybe $2 million a game, which is 3 times what Oregon was going to give the Bison.
Do you
this
really
year.
believe Minnesota would call still?
I think they would play him. Yes, I do. I think so, because now it doesn't hurt them because it's not an FCS next to them. Wisconsin, too.
I'm talking about the
Nebraska.
recruiting angle.
Why not? Play them up. Let's do it. Because now, look at this on the flip side of this, and then we'll move on. I want to get to basketball here. With St. Thomas now coming in, and you have to imagine they're going to get on the schedule before you know it. I would think that's going to happen. To you, for the Bison fans out there, does it seem like we're going down the old NCC route now?
We are down that NCC route. There's no doubt.
And that's why the fans are
It's
bored.
like everybody but Morningside.
Because now the Bison are playing in
Augustana.
Omaha. They're playing UND, USD, South Dakota State. Now St. Thomas is going to get into there. Augie wants to get into the D1 world that it reeks of what they were trying to get away from in the old days, doesn't it?
That was their advantage when they first went Division I, is nobody else was Division I. It was certainly a recruiting advantage. All you had to do is beat Northern Iowa to those Minnesota Twin Cities kids.
Right.
But now there's certainly much more competition for those types of recruits. Talking football only here, I see your point there. Absolutely. The problem with Division II, it kept reducing scholarships.
Right. That's not happened here.
Went from 42 to 36 to 30. What is it now?
I think it was 28. I think they went back. The NSIC at least went back, I think, to 32, I think, right now. I have to consult with Big E on that, but I think they're around 32 right now in Division II on that front. That to me is where I think fans are at. They look at specifically the Summit League, which I know doesn't sponsor football, and they look at it and say, Jeff, this is what we try to get away from. Omaha is in there now. St. Thomas is coming in. Augie wants in. Isn't this what we were trying to get away from? And now this is what we have right now. I don't know. I think it's still a pipe dream. Personally, I don't think it's
FBS?
Yeah, I do.
Just location is the issue.
That's
now Coastal has location.
They certainly
all those
have
schools
that.
in the East and the Appalachian states of the world.
And they got an invite. That's the biggest thing that helped them. You're right. Location, and they had a conference willing.
I just don't see the Mountain West saying.
You're probably right. Because then
we'll travel to Fargo.
The alternative is Liberty. Liberty decided, you know what? Screw it. We're not getting an invite. We're still going to go. And now look at them. I mean, they're out there spending a ton of money to play games, and nobody wants
them.
They're
going to go 8-9-1 and not have a sniff at a bowl
game.
Granted, it's different. It's a different time.
But still, I don't even know if they would get in
really?
on a normal circumstance. They might get left out because all the bowl games are affiliated with conferences.
You don't think the online school would travel to a bowl game?
That's the risk you take on that front. I am really interested to see game day tomorrow at Coastal. I know fans can't be there, but maybe you can get the company jet to fly.
Is he going to be the guest picker?
Who will be? They get Mowgli out of retirement to be the guest picker tomorrow?
No, he doesn't have the name recognition. Who is Coastal Carolina's greatest?
You know what it is? It's
grad?
right up your alley. It's a golfer. Dustin Johnson is a Coastal.
I didn't know that.
Yes, Dustin Johnson is a Coastal alum.
He's not playing this weekend in the Mexican tournament.
I would guarantee you he's going to be the guy tomorrow. Why not?
Which Tom Hoagie, as we speak here, is tied for the lead on Friday.
He's playing pretty well. We'll see what happens over the weekend. Speaking of playing pretty well, the Bison women opened up the new season. A team they lost to by 30 last year, Northern Iowa. The Bison won by nearly 20 on Wednesday night in the opener for Jory Collins in year 2. You were courtside, correct?
Correct.
You can still be courtside?
Yes.
For the game. It's one game, so maybe I should stop jumping up and down, but what were your takeaways from game 1?
I think it's okay to jump up and down a little bit for this program because I saw athleticism on that court I haven't seen in a long, long time. I saw quickness out front. I thought Heaven Hamling was a point
Really
guard.
good.
That Brooke Lamar was good, but Heaven Hamling has some pieces around her. She's got. I like the Marie Olsen kid. She didn't play that well. She got in foul trouble, but she's 6'2" and can move pretty well. I think Emily Dietz has benefited from a great improvement.
Having some players around her, no doubt. No doubt.
Some one-on-one matchups underneath, and she's pretty good. She's got some moves.
Cobbins, I think, is a future all-conference player.
Look out for Schulte. She had some moves.
Yeah, kid from Maple Grove.
Yes.
Yeah.
She played right away. She was one of the first off the bench.
Collins liked her, too. I remember.
And
remember what
Hopkins.
Remember, I'll get to her in a second. But remember what Jory Collins said about Schulte on his first signing day. She's tough. She's aggressive, and we don't have that right now. I remember that stood out to me about her coming in from Maple Grove.
And I think the most, and I overlooked this in the story, which, imagine that. I screwed up on this in my own mind. I did. But here was a team that hasn't played together a whole lot and younger than last year. They took a 10-point lead in the first quarter and held it the rest of the game.
Yep, they put the
Young
hammer down.
teams don't do that.
Yep.
Even in the third quarter, Northern Iowa made a mini run, had a couple hoops, and there was a couple instances where NDSU probably could have folded with a young team. And I can't remember, somebody nailed a three-pointer, and boom, they were back in front like 16, and it was 19.
Hamling was a former Miss Basketball finalist. I mean, she can play.
She's smooth.
She can play. I think the pieces around they're going to be fun to watch. And as you wrote about this week, for the first time in a decade, maybe decade plus, there are actual legitimate expectations around this team.
Maybe 2008, 2009.
As I was saying, yeah.
They won a game in the 2009 tourney, and then that team went 16-13, I believe?
It was Carolyn Dioff's first year.
Then they never had another winning season after that.
Nope. And that's where this program has been. That's why I think getting to fourth is doable in the conference, maybe third, and then the real work starts to try and chase down the top two, because South Dakota State beats Iowa State this week. The USD women take South Carolina for a while, and Gonzaga.
81-71 only.
Those are two top 20 teams. South Carolina is the number one team in the nation in women's basketball. So there's obviously still a road to climb there. On the men's side, they get set to play Kansas tomorrow. First time they're going to play the Jayhawks since the famous game at the Metrodome in 2009. Dave Richmond's team is 0-3. I mean, they're playing teams, some heavyweights like Creighton, who's the 10th ranked team in the country. And I thought they fared well in the second half after a shaky start there.
Yeah, I didn't think Creighton played all that well, to be honest, and to be fair about the assessment of this game. But I think NDSU showed improvement from game 1 to game 2 anyway.
Yep. Kansas
game 2 to game 3.
Game 3, yeah, because Nebraska was the second game where they didn't shoot well. And that's the biggest thing so far. They have just not shot the basketball well, and now you're going to face a Kansas team that just came off beating Kentucky the other night. That this is a major challenge.
We're finding the difference in playing these teams is they can't create separation on offense.
And they're still super young, too, as well. I mean, you got Bowden Skunberg and Grant Nelson, who last time they were playing against one another. Jamestown played Devil's Lake. That was the last time they played basketball prior to the games they were playing this week. So we'll see how this pans out. And then they have the round-robin event in Sioux Falls, which I like. That's a cool deal. They're conference teams in non-conference environment for the bubble down in Sioux Falls. The Bison will play USD, SDSU, and UND.
NDSU's off to a good start. You got to play 12 games to reach the Summit tourney. Now, don't laugh. I mean, who knows?
You have no idea how you can get there. South Dakota State, by the way, the men go and beat Iowa State the other night.
They look far and away the favorite.
You mentioned this last week when we were talking heading into the tournament down in Sioux Falls where they beat Craig Smith's team. They whooped Utah State. We knew the pieces they have. They look pretty good right now.
I think Douglas Wilson underneath reminds me of Andre Smith.
Ooh, good comparison.
When Andre Smith was leading NDSU over the likes of Wisconsin, and did he play in the Marquette game? Yeah,
yes, he did. Yeah, he played in both those games. He was tough down low for those Bison teams.
And went on to have a pretty good pro career overseas.
Before we wrap here on the big boy front, we were talking FBS football and trying to get to the finish line of this season. Ohio State says they are going to play tomorrow against Michigan State. What did you make? Did you see Kirk Herbstreit's comments there earlier this week? What did you think of that?
I was surprised he said something like that. I think, and he came out and apologized in a in a Twitter video.
He said, by the way, for folks that missed it, that Michigan was going to use COVID as an excuse for backing out of playing Ohio State later this year, which is
he made it as a mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, and he said I had no basis. It was when you're a graduate of a particular school like Ohio State, you need to be careful at all levels.
Above the board every time. You have to be. And you can't as much as people don't like Harbaugh, yourself included, you cannot underestimate what that did to the people in Ann Arbor when they heard that. There's no doubt. Even if Michigan stinks this year, they still want to play Ohio State. Even if they know they're going to lose by 50, they still want to play them because it's Ohio State. You know what I mean? Like I just, that comment was way out of bounds in my mind on that front. And it's funny to me, the game of the weekend is Coastal. It's Coastal BYU. It came about. I joked about
how
this.
How cool is BYU for saying we'll play on
hop on a plane
Tuesday?
No, Thursday.
Thursday.
It was Thursday. Literally yesterday, they made up. They said, "Yep, we'll go." Literally, there are games 15 years from now on the schedule, but here in 2020, they're making things happen in no time. That's what I love about college football this year.
How do you game plan?
You don't. Let's just go and you're watching film on the
say,
plane.
hey, we got a great quarterback.
Yep.
Who is an NFL prospect, first round.
He's moved ahead of Trey Lance right now. Zach Wilson has, and granted, some are saying he's padding his stats against bad teams, but I'm
not convinced. He's not a very big kid. I'm not convinced he's a better prospect than Trey. I'm just not.
Are you going to watch this game this weekend and take a closer look?
With a fine-tooth comb, Dom.
You're covering hoops this weekend as well, right? Bison women are taking on Green Bay
back-to-back
at the Shack, which is another weird thing about the
pretty
schedule.
Sure I've never covered back-to-back
of the same team.
Of the same team
since right? Not even the Division II days. You guys didn't do that, right?
Because
you had different teams coming in, so you're going to have that a lot this year because that's exactly how the Summit League schedule is going to go in 2021. That'll wrap it up for this edition of the Kolpack and Izzo podcast. Appreciate you listening. You can check out past episodes at inforum.com, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts, you'll find our shows. Great stuff as always. Have a great week, my man.
Have a good week.
All right, we'll see you next week on the Kolpack and Izzo podcast.